Hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of the LeanTossup CDL betting podcast. This is stage 4, week 2, which means that after this week there is stage 4, week 2, stage 4, week 3, the major, and then champs. So there's only 4 more episodes left of this year. Obviously, we will probably be back next year, but for now, thank God we're near the end here of Vanguard. I'm not gonna lie. I've had like last week some of the matches like not obviously there's some matches I was interested in, but some of the other matches I was like actually like struggling to get through. Like I found myself at times being like I don't really care if I don't really care who wins this match. Like I found myself thinking that. But anyways, that's Ryan's opinion on that. Yeah, he's my co-host, the owner of CDLMetrics. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing good. I'm in the same boat you are, and I was honestly kind of in that boat with like stage 3, major 3. Like we're at that time of the year where like Vanguard is starting to get old. We're looking forward right to the next COD, which will be out in, really a few months. But yeah, this season's going to wrap up really quickly here cuz we're recording right June 28th. So yeah, champs will be wrapped up a little over a month from now. Obviously a lot of matches before we get there, and a lot of like seeding to iron out that maybe even got murkier with last week's matches. So, um, yeah, that's what I'm most interested in. Right, the game itself, we've seen it a lot. We know what Vanguard looks like, plays like. We're used to that. But yeah, right now the drama of who's making champs, who's not making champs, I think is kind of the key storyline for the league as a whole.
Yeah, it is. It is very tight at the top. You have very interesting basically positioning here. So obviously you've got Phase at the top, 270, Optic at 225. I believe again they have in fact clinched now, I think. Because again, I think just the way the numbers work out, I believe they have actually clinched. But again, if they win a match, it'd be nice to it would have been nice if they just clinched the match and we could have said, cool, it's over. But they have not yet done that, so um, whatever. Next down is Seattle Surge. They're at 185. Yeah, they're probably okay. I wouldn't. They're probably
Yeah.
they're in good shape. They have not officially clinched. They're going to be a weird like they're probably safe, but they're going to be in a weird position where like there's like a group of teams clustered in a certain place, but they're above that. Next up, then obviously we've got London sitting at 160 points, a new reborn London. We should call them the London Phoenix because they've been come back from the ashes. Again, if you were listening to us last week, we tipped you guys to London plus 100 to reach the final. Not plus 100. Sorry, not even money. No, London 100 to 1 to reach the final and 250 to 1 to win. I bet on those. I bet a bit on both. Ryan bet on London to make the finals, and yeah, the thing of it is, so they've actually pulled down all the futures odds, so we don't even know how much closing line value we've already gotten after just one game. But yeah, I am. That might be my bet of the year. I am actually very, very happy with that bet right now. But again, that's nice to just have it sitting there, and we'll see what happens in a couple weeks with that. Next up is Toronto at 150. Again, this was a very up and down week for Toronto. Um, they
As it was
all
for a lot of teams,
as
yeah.
it was for a lot of teams. Optic, we'll talk about Optic in a bit when we come back to them. But Toronto, like they were they almost lost to LAG. They had to reverse sweep LAG. Then they just get crushed by London. And again, this is what we said. I made the call. We'll talk about a bit about that later, but we'll talk about Let's talk about standings. Let's ignore any team specific things. Let's talk about standings. Toronto at 150, Boston 140, Thieves at 130, Gorillas at 125, and then that's the top 8. So technically Gorillas still at 125. Did a little better last week, but yeah, I'm still not particularly convinced. Then you got Rocker at 120, Florida at 120, and Subliners coming back up there. They're at 90 now, only 35 points out of a champ's spot, which is interesting because as they rise, Gorillas and to a lesser extent, Boston is stagnant, and Rocker is sitting there at night just outside, and Florida is also on the outside just looking in. It's going to be really interesting. Um, what are your thoughts on this? So, like, if you had to pick the teams that make champs right now, so let's ignore FaZe, Optic, Seattle. Let's say they make it. And then I do we both agree London? I think London makes champs. Do you think London makes champs too?
Um, yeah, they are sitting at 4th now. They did look better in one match last week. Let's not, like, go crazy. They did play one match, they looked
No, yeah.
good,
I'm just saying.
but,
Let's. I want to ask what four team like what teams we want to make champs. So if we both say okay,
yeah,
London makes champs. I think London makes
I think
champs.
the LAG slide is definitely like, we've been seeing this for a while, because obviously a lot of their CDL points, like, half of them maybe, if not more, came from that Major 2 victory. Um So yeah, like outside of that one weekend, it's been a whole lot of nothing for that team. And, they put together that new roster for last weekend and yeah, almost pulled off the win versus Toronto, but still didn't. So yeah, I can see them slipping out. I think right, Paris is a guarantee just about. Yeah, it's tough. So I think Paris and LAG will miss. And then I got to pick two more teams to miss. I will stick with New York. I know they were 2-0 last week, but they still have a little bit of ground to cover, right? Like the gap between them and eighth is the same gap between like Seattle and Toronto. Like it's 35 points. Yeah, is not like super easy to climb back from. So good for them. They got the 2 wins last week, but, like, keep it up, New York, and then we can talk. But, yeah, like, I don't know. I'll say LAG, Paris. I'll say New York stay on the outside looking in. Oh, man, and then it's between a few teams really, like, I don't know what to think of Florida. Right, just based on last week, the new roster comes in, they look pretty bad in their first match and then look very much improved against Rocker. Rocker with this, like, roster since Havoc's been on has been very, very good. They split last week. Oh, boy. Thieves are a hard team to figure out. Boston's a hard team to figure out. Toronto, I think, is steady enough where they will stay afloat. So I'll say the top 5 teams will stay put. I'll say the bottom 2 teams will stay put, and then Boston, LAT, LAG, Minnesota, and Florida are all fighting for 3 spots, essentially.
Hmm.
Oh, man. My official prediction of who misses champs: Paris, New York, LAG, and Florida. That's my
Interesting.
official prediction.
Okay. I'll go Paris, LAG, Florida, and then one of Toronto and Boston. I think
So New York
Thieves.
make it back.
I think they do. I think they're gonna come in eighth. I think if I had to order, it'd be Phase Optic, Surge, London, Thieves. Then maybe it's probably gonna be either Toronto or Boston, whichever one closes better down the stretch. But they're very comparable at this point. Then Thieves, then Rocker, then Subliners. I think now I have more faith in this Thieves team kind of than this Ultra team. Like that was bad. Like and again, they were at their own home majors, so they did something, but like I don't know, this was a bit of a bad
The
week. Now maybe
Thieves are a tough team, right? Because 'Cause they're so hot and cold that, like, if they go on one of those cold stretches, then, yeah, very, very possible they slide out of the top 8. Um, but it's tough, right? With a team like that, you kinda go, "Alright, they'll win one, lose one," and where does that put them? Probably right where they are, which right now is safely above the 8th place line. So, really tough with that team. New York, I am curious. Like 2-0 start last week. They're well on their way to start in winners bracket, but their last 3 matches here are not easy. They get Seattle this week, they get Optic this week, and we'll talk about those matches more in depth, but those are 2 of the best. I know Optic looked bad last week, but I still believe Optic is one of the best teams in the league at the end of the day. And then they close it out versus an LAT team that could be hot, could be cold. So New York, I think, right, job one of, at least getting 2 wins in week 1. That's all you can do. Keep it up. Give me a winners bracket spot, and then you gotta go on a nice run, like, because 35 points is a little bit of ground to make up just knowing that there's so many teams in front of you, right? It's different if it's 35 points and there's really like one team you can catch because then it comes down to, okay, let's get hot and hope that team gets cold. When you're New York, it's like, okay, we got to stay hot and we need a lot of games to still go our way. Like we need FaZe to start winning, like all those teams at the top of the table, start winning, please, so that we can catch up on these teams in the middle. But we'll see if that plays out. I still have my doubts, but I would love to see him come back. That would be a very, very nice comeback for a very weird year for the Subliners, having started ice cold, then get hot with a roster move, but like they still find themselves in 11th on the table. So they're an interesting case, and I'm glad that they did go 2-0 because we're still having this conversation, and I think that's good for the league.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's going to be an interesting it's going to be interesting how this season closes out. I don't like outside of a couple things we don't know exactly who's going to make champs or who isn't going to make champs. This offseason is going to be really interesting too. Is there going to be expansion? Are we going to have um are we going to have 5 hardpoint maps next year? No, I mean, and also just a bunch of roster moves and like in terms of who's going to be starting on which team. Is this the phased like I think this year you can make the argument that literally like no like last year it was obvious that FaZe was going to stick together and then Toronto was going to stick together. That there's going to be no moves there. But outside of that, there was a lot of like, yeah, okay, this team could make changes and this team's going to have to make changes and stuff like that. This year, I'm just like, no one is safe. Like literally,
No.
no one on any team is safe. And I don't even know. But actually, the only team that I think actually would be safe is Seattle. I think, which is weird, and they probably shouldn't do that. And again, 3-0ing Paris doesn't get 3-0ing Paris is like cool, okay, good job. But like, if there's any team that like thinks I guarantee you they think they should be sticking together, but they should probably not. Like they'll have to figure it out, but I bet you any money they're probably going to try to keep that team together. So, anyways, let's go through the matches here. So now this is some discrepancy here between the sports books and the CDL. The CDL says the first match on Friday afternoon is Toronto versus FaZe. Now, actually, it's cool here, and I'll mention this. This is actually Canada Day. This is July the 1st is Canada Day. So technically Toronto will be playing on Canada Day. Or maybe they moved it because of Canada Day. I don't know. Or something. I don't know. But the CDL seems to think they're playing on this day. So whatever. Thieves for so let's assume let's go with the CDL schedule, not the sports books here. FaZe versus Ultra. FaZe minus 1.5 minus 120. Ultra plus 1.5 minus 110. FaZe minus 240 on the money line. Ultra plus 180. Over 3.5 minus 275. Under 3.5 plus 200. I've got FaZe with a 95% chance to win this match.
Wow. Oh
Yeah,
my goodness.
94,
Okay.
10. Okay, fine. I rounded actually up a lot. 94.3. Sorry, my bad. Uh, but no, like I've got the minus 1.5 as a minus 250. So I've already bet on the minus one and a
Wow.
half. I just think this phase team is better than this ultra team, and this ultra team, like the thing of it is, my model is a little bit biased because it thought London was like bad before, and we were kind of like, okay, it could get a little bit better. So technically, that London loss really killed them, and also not putting away LAG. Like LAG outslayed them in that in the last hardpoint map 4 hardpoint. So they did not do any favors for themselves in the eyes of the model last week. But no, I can't get behind this ultra team, and again. They did okay at the major, but like look at what they had to go through, right? They lost to FaZe winners round one. Then they go down to play oh god, who did they play second round? Let me just
Ooh, Ultra?
Ultra, yeah. The
Um,
let me see. So they okay,
Thieves maybe?
they lose. They lose to FaZe 3-1. Then they fall down. Then they beat Paris 3-1. Then they 3-0 Rocker, who was having a hell of a time on land there. Then they 3-0 Florida. Then they 3-1 Thieves, but then they lose 3-2 to FaZe. So like again, Minnesota, that one was a really weird one. Minnesota probably should have had them, but then beating Florida 3-0 was not particularly unexpected or impressive, to be honest with you. Um, and then beating Thieves. Thieves can be hot or cold depending on the day, which is weird because Thieves immediately beat Optic and then they lose to Ultra, but then they lose to FaZe again, and it's just like it's very possible that the result, and it was their own home major. Their own home major was a bit of a red herring, like that beating LEG 3-2. Like, so what? Then the honeymoon period for the new LAG team was 2 games, was 2 maps. That was it. It was just 2 maps, and then the honeymoon was over. Like, I'm scared of this Toronto team, and and as I mentioned earlier at the top of the show, they might not make champs. Like, I am not confident in them because the schedule ahead for them is not particularly easy. They've got FaZe this week. This is their one. This is the game. This is the week they only have 1 match. Um, they played 2 last week. They went 1-1, right? They barely scraped out a win against LAG. Then they lost to London. They play FaZe this week. Okay, that's fine. That's their one and done game. Then next week for week 3 they play Boston and then they play Optic. Like, it's not impossible they could be 1-4 at the end of the stage. And then they're in a losers bracket. And then if they get, I don't even know who that would be that they'd have to, because again, it's to me functionally is random, but like it depends on who comes down to play them. But like they could get really kind of screwed there, and I don't want to be this all like if this ultra team could miss champs. At which point then, and again, it's interesting. There was rumors that they could that the one team, I think it was New York, could try to get Scrappy. That didn't happen. I think that's very interesting that that didn't happen. I think this Ultra team is holding on to Scrappy and maybe one or two other people for next year, and I think they're kind of like, okay, you like if they'd won it. Here's the thing: I think if longer term they didn't see a future for Scrappy in the team, they would have gotten like again. He's as of their player grades, he's the best player in the league as of the player grades. And again, yes, fine, 1 match, but still though that does mean something. Though, like he had an amazing match. And I would not be surprised if they see a future for him on the team and they're holding him to like, okay, we have to keep this team together for this year. But like the second this year is over, I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? You were shocked when I had FaZe as a 95% favorite in this match. Um, what are your thoughts on this match and just kind of Ultra in general? Are you with me that this team is in trouble? Because again, even getting 8th place in champs and then immediately going to FaZe round one, and then okay, fine, it's double limb, but still though, like you're immediately you're basically walking into losers bracket in champs. What are your thoughts here on Ultra?
Yeah, I agree with you strongly on one of your points and disagree strongly on one. So, yeah, the 95% chance to win for FaZe in this match is high. Like that's just I don't know how that happened. Just like thinking about it like this, right? FaZe on the year have won 71% of their matches. And, if you say, okay, FaZe has played a league average schedule, and if like let's call Toronto Ultra a league average team, well then FaZe like ballpark estimate should probably be like 70% favorites in this match. That seems about right. Like a 95% chance to win. That's like what I'd give FaZe to beat Paris, right? Like, oh yeah, maybe Paris, 1 in 20 times can take out FaZe if they get a couple maps to squeak by, but 95% to be a capable team, is a little steep. Now, what I will say is you're right, their outlook for this Major 4 specifically is not great. I have them right now pegged as the 10 seed, um, which is losers bracket. It's pretty close, and I think Optic having a bad week last week really was not good for Toronto, because right now Optic, Boston Breach, and Toronto Ultra are within 0.06 expected wins for me, right? Optic at 2.34, Boston at 2.33, and Toronto at 2.28. So there's a cluster of teams right at that line where winners bracket and losers bracket separates. So if Optic continue to struggle, they could very well finish with like 2 wins. And yeah, Toronto's schedule is brutal, right? If you think Optic are still a capable team that should be favored over Toronto, that's a tough match. And obviously, FaZe have had their number for the last year and a half now. Um, yeah, and then Boston's in that mix too, just among, teams that have struggled recently. They went 1-1 last week. Their schedule is also a little tough, but we'll see. But yeah, you're right. Toronto could very, very well start in losers bracket, and if they do, right? There's that worry that, like, they draw a bad first matchup, maybe a phase team loses in round 1 and comes down, and it's like, "Okay, we've seen this a number of times." Or a Seattle team or an Optic, whoever it might be, like, you run the risk of leaving the major with no CDL points while everybody around you is collecting them. So, yeah, I don't know. Now I'm looking at that, little buffer they have in the standings, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I still do have more confidence in them than, like, LAG for sure, and I think the point gap between them and, like, Rocker and Mutineers is enough where they could stabilize even if one of those teams gets hot, so I'm not hitting the panic button on Toronto yet, but yeah, no, very realistic chance they go 2 and 3 in this stage, even 1 and 4, and start in losers and, you know, don't do anything at the major. So I'd be a little worried, but wouldn't be panicky yet. As far as the odds on this match, I think these odds are pretty spot on. If there's one side I'd lean to, it is actually with Toronto. I think that's just in part like what we just saw with FaZe, 6-0ing Thieves twice. Like that was a series that went to a fifth game, but FaZe dominated completely. So I think their number is maybe skewed a little bit here. Yeah, I'm seeing FaZe to cover -1.5 at -120. That's about right. I have that as basically a 50-50 prop. So not a ton of value either way here. I think this is a pass for me. Um, but I'm not again panicking on Toronto. I think they're a solid team. Um, last week was not great for them. They got a 1-1 finish. They would have loved 2-0, but yeah, this could very well be a loss for Toronto, an expected loss at that. But there's still some time for them to rebound and further advance their position for this next major.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're gonna. I don't know. I think you're more optimistic than I am, but yeah, I'm interested to see what this team does because if they don't make champs or they like go basically 0-2 out of champs, then like I would not be surprised to see significant changes on this team, and that could look like scrappy because they've got an amazing challengers lineup, right? Like bands could retire, right? Bands could hang it up and say, "Cool, I'm done," and then that could be an SMG again. That like they love EU players. Could be Hydra, right? That could be high. They could get Hydra. They could put like again an insane lineup would be Scrappy, Hydra, Kleenex, Cammy. That would be insane. That team could beat. That's a team that can beat Face consistently, which is the benchmark here. That's what you need to do, right? If you're trying to build a CDL team, the first question you need to wake up every day and ask yourself is, can this? Well, not every day. I mean, you don't need to be like every morning. You're like 6 a.m. Like, oh, can our team beat Phase? Like, no. Like the team. The question you have to ask yourself is, can this team beat Phase? And it's the same thing in the NFL, right? Like, can this team win a Super Bowl? Right? Can this team win the Super Bowl? Can this team beat the Chiefs? Can this team beat the Bills? Right? If you're the Panthers, good luck on that. But outside of that, like if you're not if you don't wake up every day and think your team can win the Super Bowl or beat Phase, then what are you doing? You're just playing for second then, right? Or in the case of the Panthers, probably fourth in the division. So yeah, this is the thing. So, or actually, no, sorry, the Falcons are in their division. They're playing for third in their division. So, but no, this is the thing, right? So it's a hard. It's basically it's not easy to figure out. Like it's some tough decisions going forward for this Ultra team. Anyway, next match. Minnesota versus London. Minnesota -1.5 +165. London +1.5 -220. Minnesota on the money line -150. London +115 on the money line. Over 3.5 -325. Under 3.5 +230. Um, this match for me is weird. I lean London in this. Let me just see the model says. Model has this basically as a toss up. I've got this
Yeah.
3-2. I've got Minnesota winning this 51% of the time. I've got this very close. I actually think my model thinks Minnesota is a better hardpoint team, which is interesting because on although there's no hardpoint spreads on Bovada, which is where I'm getting the lines from, if you go to Bet365, which is very similar match lines, I think London's only plus 110. Minnesota is actually the under, like London, the spread, the hardpoint spread is London minus 12 and a half, which I actually find that very interesting. But I actually have Minnesota as the better hardpoint team. So you actually get 12 and a half points if you go to Bet365. But like I think London wins this game. And the thing of it is, I don't necessarily, I have attached MVP features, which definitely are probably dead at this point. Well, yeah, they're dead. It'd be like, God, who, I don't even know who they give it to. I don't even like, they don't have that lineup right now. Maybe we'll have
Yeah,
that line later.
Minnesota would have to win. That essentially is a rocker to win major 4 kind of a bet, and hope that, like, attaches the reason why.
That'd be like four and
So it's
one.
not dead, but, I
Well,
mean,
who are they even going to give MVP to? I don't even
right now,
know.
I guess, I like, Celium, I think, is still considered the
But
favorite.
they haven't won a major. Like, does that
They have
matter?
not won a major, but they've been to all of them. And yeah, I am a little worried. I have a dashy future to win MVP. Obviously, the 0-2 start is not pretty, and Atlanta won their match last week. So just the odds that Atlanta win the major over Optic are, pretty high because there's a legit chance that Optic start in losers bracket. So if FaZe finally get that major, at major 4, or just again go to the final and Celium keeps doing what he's doing, like, I think it will be him. But we'll see, right? Because Dashy still puts up crazy numbers even when Optic loses. So it's
It's
got to be
interesting.
one of those guys. If not, like say Seattle repeats and wins major 4,
We could give it
then
to
bring in the Pred and Sib debate maybe, or Mac if he goes crazy, something like that.
watch. Somehow
Um,
they give Pred MVP and then they give Sib Rookie of the Year. We lose our 8-1s.
that would be tough.
Well, you could maybe give Pred MVP and Rookie of the Year, but like, what would they give MVP to accuracy? They can't. That would be insane, right? I
I
don't
don't think so unless, like, the intangibles argument comes into play because he is kinda like the in-game leader for that team. He's the one vet who's been here for, more than 3 years. Um, so yeah, I can see one of those guys, but it's tough for me to see anybody else, like, unless a different member of FaZe or Optic, goes off like, say Simp looks like he did last year just out of the blue. And then FaZe goes on to win the major, like, okay, then I could see like, oh, Simp was the reason why they won this major. He's the most valuable player on that team, therefore he gets the MVP again, something like that. But it's a short list right now. I think it's got to be down to realistically like Celium, Dashy, maybe Shotzi if you want to throw him in there, and then like any one of the Seattle guys because right? Like there are other teams that could win Major 4, like, just about every team could, but, like, let's say London wins Major 4, like, is there any way that, like, Afro or Zero, like, wins MVP? I don't think so, just because the middle of their year was so dead that I don't think this major would do anything for them. Maybe a newcomer, like, I don't know, if Subliners win Major 4, like, do you is Hydra in that mix now? I don't know, like, you can't throw Paul in there or Kismet even though those guys have been awesome since they've joined the team. So yeah, it's a short list, I think, and it all kinda depends on how FaZe and Optic do at this last major, I think. And Seattle, I guess, if you wanna throw them in there too.
After hearing everything you said, I'm not convinced they're gonna give it to accuracy. So
I mean, they could. It could happen again.
watch, they will do it. I mean, they give it to Aaron Rodgers every year, even though it's just like it's like okay, I guess, right? Like he's not like statistically, he doesn't have the greatest ever performance, but
If accuracy what would need to happen is accuracy would need to, like, put up some stats at Major 4, which, his numbers compared to his teammates throughout the year have been lower, but for 1 weekend, it's possible that accuracy has, a 1.2 KD and, carries his team and all that stuff, but I think
if
it's more likely that Pred or Sib, or both of those guys pop off so much more that it goes to one of them. But again, that would need to be a Seattle back-to-back major victory, which they're set up to do with a win over Paris last week. Like, it's a gimme, but they got it done, and winners bracket should be attainable just because the rest of their schedule is not too bad either. But yeah,
The
the list is short
the thing
for
about
sure.
MVP is like I always feel this. It's like they're gonna give it to they are never gonna give it to the person who should win it. They're just gonna give it to the person who they can find an excuse to give it to. And like if Seattle wins the next major, they'll give it to accuracy and then they'll give Pred Rookie of the Year, which is insane. But like I feel like because like literally last year the MVP should have been Tom Brady until he lost 9-3 to I think it was 9-3 or 9-6 or 9-0 to the Saints. And they're like, cool, okay, this is an excuse now. We're gonna give it to Aaron Rodgers. And it's like
As a Packer fan, I would fight back on that. Rodgers lost 2 games as a starter last year. One of those was week 1. So, I don't like, Rodgers was amazing. I get that Tom Brady put up some better numbers maybe, but, um, yeah, I don't know. Aaron Rodgers isn't the GOAT. I would say Tom Brady's the GOAT, but if you wanna go off of last year, like, Rodgers just wins games, man, except in the playoffs. That's an issue for some reason,
yeah,
so
except in the cold against the 49ers. Anyways, moving on. So, okay, we got to talk about this match. I'm leaning London. I just think London wins his match, but at the same time, I don't feel strongly enough to bet it at plus 115. I wish there was a better line somewhere in this game, but there isn't really. Even on like London is minus 150 to win the hard point. That's horrible. Plus 120 to win the search. Yeah, their search was a little shaky against Toronto. Um, Plus 150 to win the control. That's maybe not horrible. I think Minnesota didn't have a great. I didn't actually watch. Yeah, this is how watch. I had Minnesota spread and money line against Optic. Didn't even watch the game. Not to be fair, it's because I was eating supper at the time. But then I was following it and stuff. But like I got to rewatch that game. But yeah, no, it's
I'm
okay.
kind of in agreement with you here.
There's your
Yeah,
bet.
the
London
prices
plus
are
150
about
to plus 150 win the control. That's my bet if I had to, which is insane by the way. That's the best bet we can find on this board. It's like
yeah, yeah, let me see just, with, like, map vetoes, control vetoes are pretty easy to figure out, so we could get a good idea of what's gonna get played. Um, London aren't great on anything. They're 8-8 on Gavudu, they've played that by far the most. Minnesota, 4-3. Minnesota likes Tuscan. I mean, both of these teams are kinda middle of the pack, if not below average control teams. Um, Minnesota has an advantage on Berlin for sure. Uh, London has a slight advantage on Gavudu, and then Minnesota again a slight advantage on Tuscan. So maybe you give the slight edge to Minnesota, just thinking it's going to be Berlin or Tuscan. But I don't know. We've seen some interesting control vetoes as of late. Some that have worked, some that haven't. And I am curious to see if maybe as teams get ready for champs, they want to test out some controls or they have something up their sleeve in these control maps that they maybe haven't looked great in. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't mind that. Control's obviously a very toss-up game. Even with ticks as the tiebreaker now, like underdogs win in a decent amount of these matches. So I don't hate that. I do think these prices are pretty locked in. If you're gonna make me pick, the model actually would say rocker. I kind of lean London. Um, I think these teams are really close, right? Like Minnesota have looked like a top 6 team with Havoc on the roster. Last week they split their series, a nice win against Optic, and then they come out and get smoked by a Florida team that a lot of people thought Minnesota were just going to take care of. So Minnesota's somewhere in the middle, and then London, right? They look good in their one match versus Toronto with this roster we saw early in the year. And that roster, right through the first month and a half of the season, was, yeah, I would say, like a top 3, top 4 roster. So you can make the case that London maybe should be favored, but I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to say at most it's a 50-50. So again, maybe slight lean to London. If you do like London, I wouldn't mind like taking the -1.5, just because I do think London is still the better hardpoint team. So if they win the series, I think it would probably be in a game 4. Um, but again, you got to take either both hard points and, weasel your way out of a search and destroy versus a good rocker team in that mode. And again, control, you're probably not going to have a map advantage on, so you got to weasel that out in 5 rounds maybe. But Very possible. I think this is gonna be one really good series. Um, and I'll be rooting for Rocker, right? I want him to make winners bracket. I want him to make champs. Um, but yeah, we'll see how it plays out. But it should be a good one for sure.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting match. I'm looking forward to watching it. Maybe not so much on betting it. Um, Last match of Friday, which is also Canada Day. Boston versus Seattle. Seattle minus 2.5 plus 140. Boston plus 2.5 minus 185. Seattle minus 550 on the money line. Breach plus 365. Over 4.5 plus 275. Under 4.5 minus 400. Model loves Seattle here, only slightly less than it loves Phase against Toronto. I got Seattle at 92%. This team looked good. I mean, here's the thing. Yes, they only played one game, and yes, that game was against Paris. But this team is now getting to the point now where, and again, we see this sometimes with some teams, they just take care of business against lesser teams. They just take care of business. They get it done. They get the job done. And like against Paris, there was a like we talk about closing line value. I have never the closing line value I saw on people who bet Paris was absolutely insane. I have never seen the line opened at like Paris plus 900. By the time we got to like Thursday or Friday, it was like plus 650. By Saturday morning, it was plus 350. I hopped on. Now, unfortunately, I threw a Seattle in a parlay. I threw Seattle minus 1.5 in a parlay. Didn't bet the minus 2.5. Because I'm like, no, this line is wrong. So unfortunately, I lost the parlay. Lost on something else. I think it was. Oh yeah, it lost because I had Rocker money line in the parlay, and then Phase minus 1.5. So it was chalked anyway. But like, I was like, this is insane. There's no way Seattle is losing to Paris. Like, and what was this, just hype because Temp on Twitter was like, we're gonna upset some teams. Like, well, first of all, Seattle isn't even one of the teams. Like, they're going to champs anyways. It doesn't. You can if Paris beats Seattle, they're still going to champs, right? Like, that was insane to me. The fact that replacing what John for Johnny after basically just adding an NY to his gamer tag. Apparently you're just apparently an amazing team that could beat Seattle. That was insane. And like, while the first line was probably too high, this line is not too high. I don't hate. I've got minus 2.5 as plus 172, so it's not great value. But like, there's probably some value on the minus 1.5. What's the minus 1.5? Probably like 200 or something. 240. Yeah, it's not great. But you can look at some spreads here, though. Like, I might look at like a hard point spread. The hard point spread on Bet365 is minus 27.5. That seems a little low. I'd maybe take that. The search spread is minus 1.5, minus 125. That's not bad. Um, well, there's ways you could probably play this. I kind of don't hate the idea of Seattle just coming in and just cleaning up and taking care of business. What are your thoughts on this one? Do you see like Boston did beat Optic last week, which was weird. That was a really weird thing that they did, and I'm still not completely sure how or why they did that, but it is a thing that they did. What are your thoughts on it? And do you think they're going to do it again?
Yeah, no, I think Boston proved that, like a lot of teams in this league, they're somewhere in the middle. And I know the last month or two, I guess month maybe, for them hasn't been great, but a split last week is decent evidence that they are one of these teams in the middle. And there's a lot of those teams. Seattle, they're tough, right? Because right now they look amazing and they crushed Paris, which if you're a really, really good team, like you kill bad teams, and that's what happened. So, you can't just brush that off as nothing. But on the flip side, like if you're telling me an above average team is facing an average team and the above average team is minus 550 on the money line, I'm going to shake my head no. So I do think there is value in Boston. It's kind of a, hold your breath and hope it happens, scenario. Because again, right, like Seattle's not gonna go undefeated until champs. They're gonna slip up here and there. And yeah, this is one they could slip up in. So I'm not laying the price on them. The plus 140 is not good enough, right? This line is like if it was phase breach, like, okay, I can get down with the minus 550, like that would make sense. But this Seattle team, it's here and there for them. They're also one of those hot and cold teams, except they're a little streakier, right? Whereas like a team like Thieves, right? They're hot and cold, but it's literally one match. Same thing with Florida, right? Win one match convincingly, lose one match convincingly. Seattle throughout the year has been hot to start the year, then kind of went through a midseason lull, and now they look like that hot team again. So tough to figure out. The prices are way too inflated right now for Seattle. So I'm gonna lean with Boston slightly. The one thing I will say, the more I look at map vetoes, the more I like Seattle's side. Control's obviously a big discrepancy between these teams. Uh, yeah, Boston still not great at that mode. Seattle still very good at that mode. And then, you look at like the hardpoint maps that these teams like to play. Seattle, Gavudu has become an auto veto for them. They don't have a win on that hardpoint map this year. You take the other three maps into account, and they are 24 and 20, so slightly above average hardpoint team. Boston is just kind of average across the board in hardpoint. Search and destroy Boston, very reliant on Berlin. If Seattle want to play that, that's fine, but they have other good maps to work with. And then in control, like this is uh, I think maybe an underrated discrepancy. Seattle is so good at control, especially on maps not named Gavudu, right? On Berlin and Tuscan, they're a combined 15 and 7. Those same two maps for Boston, they are 8 and 9. Like, fine for Boston. But yeah, it does look like a Seattle win. I will say that. But like, don't be shocked if Boston make this a real fight. It's tough to say where this Boston team is because right, they make the switch Capsule out, Vivid in. First match they squeak out versus Optic, and we're like, holy moly. What do we make of that? It's a good win. And then yeah, come out and get beat by Thieves. But again, Thieves are one of those teams that can smoke you. And we saw Thieves smoke Boston at the last major in maybe the quickest series of all time. So really tough to figure out. All I know is that the price for Seattle's a little too rich for me. Um, so I lean Boston. It's the favorite match for me out of any of the three on Friday. Um, in terms of like value on one team over the other. But yeah, Seattle should be favorites. They are favorites. I just would put it closer to like, minus 200, something in that ballpark rather than minus 550. So
That is fair. It does seem like I don't know what to make of this Boston team. I mean, they have
no
Vivid.
one does. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, like I mean, I think of it
That
as
that Seattle price makes it feel like, oh, Seattle's like as good as FaZe now. And it's like, maybe, but I kind of think no.
I think if this was Phase, this line would be like minus 800 for Phase. But like, and like the minus 250 would be like minus 110. Or
Possible.
like
Yeah.
it would be. I mean, there is still a little bit, but like it's like we've seen Phase just destroy Breach a bunch of times, right? So it's clear that Breach does have some sort of a disadvantage um against Thieves. I don't know what it is. It's like a weakness. It's like it's their kryptonite basically. I don't know why, because like they've now lost 3-0 twice to Thieves, and it's a slightly different roster too. I'm just trying to think. Seattle, I don't think Seattle's really had a problem with Boston before. I don't know. This is just is a mess. Like I I don't know what to make this Boston team is. And again, maybe Vivid is the actually no, Vivid is not the Florida course because Florida still did Florida things last week, but it's the weirdest. I don't know what to make of this team. I like this is a thing where it's just like yeah, like I could see Boston taking this to a game 5 and losing game 5 to an accuracy 1v2 clutch or something. But I could also see Surge just dominate, like just blowing them out 3-0, right? And I don't know which one it's going to be. And sure, maybe there's value. Like what's Breach plus 1.5? Probably what 200, 180. That's still not great. But like that's where we are with this team now. I don't. This team is also in danger of not making champs too. The road for them, the road ahead for them is not particularly easy either. They've got Surge, but they've got LEG, so that's not horrible. But then they've got Ultra, which, well, okay, we can't double count it both ways. We can't say that Ultra's going to lose to Breach as a negative, and then oh well, Breach could lose to Ultra as a negative for them. One of those teams has to win that game. But then that's it for the stage. But again, like they could be now they did win. They did beat Optic, which is a thing. But like they could still be they could be 1 and 2. Like they could be not 1 and 2. They actually yeah they could be yeah, they only have one match, so they could be basically like 1 and 3 at the end of this week, depending. Like or maybe like well they probably beat. Well, I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But like yeah, they could be 1 and 3 in the stage at the end of this week. So like Toronto and Boston, they're in trouble there, I think. But anyway, moving on to the first match on Saturday, Florida versus London. This is a match that I like. Florida -1.5 +150. London +1.5 -200. Florida is the favorite in this match. -130 on the money line. London is even +100. Um, Florida over 4.5 +165. Under 4.5 -220. I love London in this game. I've already bet London at London money line, and I've actually already bet London -1.5, which you can have for +225. I actually really do like that. And I think you can have London on the control at +150 if you want. Um, I actually really do like London in this match, and I think what's the um you can actually get London +6.5 in the search in the hard point, which to be honest doesn't seem like much, but the fact is that you're basically paying on Bet365, you're paying -120 money London money line in the hard point, or you're paying -115 London on the hard point on Bodog. So I mean, why not just pay the extra 50 cents and get 6.5? Will it matter? No, but like that's nice to just have for 50 cents. It's probably not going to matter. London could probably do well, but like this Florida team, man, like they come in, they have one good game against one good map against New York. They almost blow it, and they do come close to blowing it too. This was not like a oh man that was close. No no no. They almost did blow that. They really did blow that, almost blow it, and like they almost blow it, and then they immediately lose the next three maps. And then they just turn around and 3-0 Mutineers. I have no idea what this team is. I have no idea what this team is doing. Who knows? Now again, to be fair, it was a Major Maniac revenge match. It was also a Havoc revenge match too, but I guess the Major Maniac one was more raw. Um I don't know. I'm on London on this. I'll take London. I think London is better than this line. But at the same time, if Florida were to somehow 3-0 London, would not be surprised to me at all. What are your thoughts on this? Are you with me on London here, or do you? What are your thoughts on Florida? What is this team? I don't know. Help.
Florida is still somewhere in the middle. And yeah, this is a little curious to me. Like I was not expecting Florida to be a favorite. I mean, I guess it makes some sense that they're a favorite, but like I don't know. Like London, because right to me, London are they're either a team in the middle like Florida, and if that's the case, then like it should be even money on both sides. So London right now at even money is like it's not value, but it's fine, you know? Or London is maybe this team that we saw early in the year. So if your two options are okay, London is on par with Florida, or London is a top 4 team and should be favorites, then like yeah, the only side to take in this is with the Ravens. One thing that I think might be interesting to do this weekend, and I talked about it a little bit last weekend, it's kind of like you're betting into the same thing multiple times. So like last week we talked about like I want to say like Toronto, right? They were minus whatever favorites in both of their matches, and their opponents were like plus 150 or better. And the hope is like, all right, like just hope Toronto goes 1-1 on the weekend. You take both of the underdogs, hope one of them hits, and that's exactly what happened. Same thing with like Boston Breach. Like they were underdogs in both their matches. Can they squeak out a win? And they did against Optic. So I think similar logic to that, like London -1.5 in both the Minnesota series and in this Florida series might make a lot of sense, right? Because we know Minnesota, very, very good search team, very good control team, middle of the pack, if not below average hardpoint team. If London win that series, pretty good odds they do it in 4 maps or less. And Florida, like everybody knows, Florida does not take games the distance, like or series the distance. They lose in 3 or 4, they win or 3 and 4. And again, if London come out, beat Rocker, maybe that's more evidence that hey, this London team might actually be what they were at the beginning of the year. And it's not crazy to think they come out and beat Florida easily the next day. So those minus 1.5s have to be nice payouts. I see, or actually, I have the plus 1.5 up right now. But regardless, you're gonna get like a plus 150 or better in both of those matches. So I kind of like just doing both of that and hoping this London team, wins one of these series convincingly, which I think could happen. We're already right in the London futures market a decent bit for the major, but if you're not yet and you want to get in on London now, I think this is a thing that makes a lot of sense, right? Just hope that they continue this hot streak because I'm not sure how nice of a price they're going to have once the major finally does roll around. But to me, these prices are still pretty nice in these series. So yeah, I think I lean London. I don't love it, but like London minus 1.5 in this one and in the Rocker match, I think could be a nice pairing because just with how these teams are constructed, Florida lose quickly if they do lose, and Minnesota wins a lot of their matches in 5. So I think we could maybe get one of those here. But yeah, I don't want to say I'm back in on London, but like I kind of want to be back in on London. Even though we saw one match last week with Gizmo back in, but like yeah, they looked improved for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm excited to see what this team is going to be able to do. I like I like this yeah, I like this London team. I think they could do some really cool things. But yeah, let's see what they can do. Moving on to the second match on Saturday, Optic versus Paris. Optic minus 2.5 plus 130, Paris plus 2.5 plus minus 170. Optic minus 800 on the money line, Paris plus 500. Over 4.5 plus 275. Under 4.5 minus 400. I don't know. Who is this line giving more respect to? Is this line giving more respect? Is it saying Optic is worse than we think, or is it saying Paris is better than we think? Because this is basically where this line was like when the on like for Thursday, Friday against Seattle. So I don't know. I don't even. What does the model even say in this match? 3-0,
Yeah,
89% chance.
I have a strong lean in this match, and I think we'll be on the same side.
I,
Hopefully,
I, I suspect
um,
we're both going to say
I
Optic
think
here. I don't think you're about to say Paris. I
yeah,
mean,
no, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, I've got Optic. I just don't know if I want to lay the minus 2.5. That's the only thing. Maybe some map spreads. What's the minus 35? That seems a little low for Optic minus 35.5 for map one. That seems a little low. Basically, kind of minus 150 for the minus 1.5. That's a little low. This might be like a good get right spot for Optic, to be honest with you. I could see this being a good
Yeah,
get right spot. Like, okay, cool. Yeah, we lost to Boston, which is like not a great team, but not a bad team either. And then, okay, we also lost to Minnesota, who's actually a decent team. Now we're gonna go into Paris, and then just well, not going into Paris. They're going into their facility in Texas. But yeah, no, they're yeah. This is a bounce. This feels like a bounce back. This really does feel like a bounce back spot for Optic. So yeah, I think I'll take Optic. I just don't know if I want to like get up to the minus 2.5, but maybe we'll have to see. What
I will. I will.
you're gonna
I
take it?
don't usually side with the minus 2.5s in these big mismatches, but like, yeah, I will take. I think this price is just like, okay, Optic are 0-2 in their last 2 matches. Their price drops a little bit. Great buyback opportunity, in my opinion. Um, like this is exactly the team you would want to play. And just looking at last week's grades that we have for the players, obviously Dashy went crazy as he always does for this team. Shotzi was one of the worst players last week, just in terms of everybody who had played. And like Shotzi, I am convinced is one of the best players in the league. Everybody who watches COD knows Shotzi's amazing. So I'm buying a bounce back from him specifically. Scump and Proloot also weren't great, but like there were rumors that Optic were maybe playing under the weather for one, if not both matches. Give them a week to rest and hopefully they're all right now. Like we've seen what this Optic team can do. Obviously, they peaked at Major 1 and it's been so ever since. But like this Paris team is horrendous and this Optic team is good. So yeah, I'll buy the bounce back for Optic here. I mean, like, what scares you? Like, Optic will win the control. Like, that's almost a guarantee. I feel like Paris has I'm sorry, 7 wins on control this year. 6 of those have been on Gavudu, where they're 6-6. So it's like, okay, they're average on Gavudu. Let's just veto that because we're Optic and we can veto whatever we want. And like, yeah, you get to play on Tuscan or Berlin, where you're very good on both maps. And Paris on Berlin and Tuscan combined, they're 1-11. Like that, good luck winning that game. And then it's like you need some magic to happen in Search and Destroy, or you need some weird result in a hard point where but like Optic, if I were them, I would just veto Bocage. We know that map is very mixy. They're already not great on it to begin with. So that could be one, even though Paris looked really bad on that map last week, like that's the one map where I could see things getting weird. So if you're Optic, veto Bocage, Hardpoint, veto Gavudu Control, and you should have this series in the bag. Just thinking like Shotzi's not going to play like that again. Dashy's going to keep doing his thing, and as long as Scump and Proloot are, you know, not detriments to the team, which they largely aren't, this team should be completely fine. So, yeah, Optic -2.5. I don't usually side with the -2.5, but here I do think it makes some sense.
I will think about that one. I might join you on that one. We'll have to see. Um, Next up on Saturday, Seattle versus New York. Seattle -1.5, -115. Subliners +1.5, -115. So it's basically that you're basically looking at even basically both ways on who's going to cover the spread. Seattle -1.5 or Subliners +1.5. Seattle -260 on the money line. Subliners +190. Over 3.5 -240. Under 3.5 +180. I have this as basically a 3-2. I have this as Seattle winning this, but in basically going to a game three. This is actually probably one of the better games of the weekend, honestly. If I had to hazard a guess, I basically have Seattle as a -138 favorite, so there is some value on New York, but at about 2-1, there is some value on New York. I don't hate that. You're getting +200 on Bet365. It's not that big of a difference, but no, I mean I kind of do like New York here. This New York team is definitely on the warpath here. They're trying to get to champs. They need every single game. This is a game where Seattle's not going to necessarily need it, and at this point, you're almost wondering if some of these teams are like, yeah, fine, whatever. New York needs these games. Let's get these games. Like they're gonna win the game. Um, and then we'll move on. Like, and then like Subliners is running through all this, so I don't hate Subliners at all. Um, Subliners +10.5 in the hard point. That's not horrible. Subliners have looked better. +1.5 on the search. That's not bad either. So yeah, I think I'm probably taking the subliners here, probably the +1.5, maybe even sprinkling a bit on the money line, depending on what we see with Seattle versus Boston. And again, this is another thing we talked about this last week, right? Get that value. So for example, if we're seeing, and again, we'll know this because um, Seattle is playing on Friday and London is and New York is not. If Seattle is struggling to put away Boston, if Boston wins one game, immediately go bet on New York, right? Because that line's going to be gone hours in a couple hours, right? Immediately go bet on this on the subliners, right, or something like that, right? Or if Surge destroys Boston 3-0, then wait until the next day, then bet the subliners, right? So there's different ways you can play that and see. But yeah, I kind of like the subliners there. What are your thoughts on it? Do you agree with me on the subliners, or are you're gonna back Seattle?
Yeah, no, back-to-back games, I think we're on the same page. I rarely am on the side of the subliners this year, but yeah, I think this is another match where it makes a little bit of sense to fade the hype on Seattle. Right? New York went 2-0 last week, and both wins were somewhat convincing. They won both of them in 4 maps, right? They didn't even need the map 5 to close out, LAG and Florida, who we know are not the best competition, but when you're beating not Paris and it's in 4 maps or less, that those are solid wins. Um, so yeah, I don't mind subliners, especially the +1.5 at -115. I think that's some decent value. Um, yeah, these teams are I have basically a toss up in hardpoint and then slight edges to Seattle in search and in control. But yeah, I see this as maybe like a 60-40 in favor of Seattle. So with all that being said, value on the underdog with the subliners. And yeah, I don't mind backing a team that keeps needing to win versus a team in Seattle that they haven't played a real opponent in quite some time. They had one match last week against Paris, took care of business, good for them. But the subliners team is hungry for some more wins. This win over Seattle, it doesn't help them as much as a win over Minnesota or Florida or any of those teams at the bottom of the table would do. But they got to keep winning. And this, again, I think is a pretty winnable game for them. And if not, at least push the game 5, which I think they can do. So I'm with you on subliners. I don't absolutely love it, but I think that's definitely the side to take. And I almost don't mind going on the opposite side of Seattle because we have those, right, those Sib and Pred futures to win Rookie of the Year. As long as nothing crazy happens and no rookies come up out of nowhere to steal that, those are good. Um, so yeah, I don't mind just taking a slight Seattle dip, right? Buying that maybe their fall from grace happens sooner rather than later. Um, but yeah, I'm a little surprised because I never am on the side of subliners, but right here I am. So it can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think Subliners could win this game. They kind of need to win this game, right? Like this is a game that this is 10 points, and you win this game, and then you have Optic the next day. You win both those games, you're just 10 points back of LEG. They lose both of the games,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
I mean, again, you're close. You're getting there. You're not out of champs yet. It's going to be a hell of a comeback, but it's not. You're not out of the woods yet. Last game on Saturday. FaZe versus Gorillas. God. FaZe -2.5 +130. LEG +2.5 -170. -750 on the money line for FaZe. +475 for LEG. Over 3.5 -155. Under 3.5 +120. God. I don't even. What?
No thanks on either team. I mean, phase are I just feel like phase prices are inflated right now just because, right, the thinking is okay, Optic is sliding, phase is clearly the best team in the league because they are at least consistently good all the time. And yeah, this LAG team, we've seen the slide ongoing since, the stage 3 qualifiers. It's been not great. Um and yeah, it was a really bad week to be a Gorillas fan. Because if I'm not mistaken, they did go 0-2. Let me double check that here. They lost. Yeah, they lost to Toronto and then lost to. Ooh, I'm already blanking. LAG lost to Toronto, then lost to New York. That's right. Yeah. I want no part of this game. I'm very, very sure that FaZe will win this. But again, the prices are just really steep. Do I think they win it in a sweep? Maybe, but it's a +130 payout. I think LAG is good enough in search that they can hang. Um,
Or
a
they could just
hard
do
point.
something. They could do something stupid, right? Like it'll be like, oh look, so the map one spread is like 37.5, right? So okay, maybe you take a swing at it, you're like, fine, phase -37.5, map one, hardpoint. And then see, then they the problem is that at that point, if LEG is at I don't even know what map it would be, but if LEG is at -180 or something, 180 points or something, and then FaZe is at like 240. It's like 240 to 180 or something, and then FaZe is like whatever. Let's just rotate to the next hill, and they just give gorillas like 30 seconds of hill time, and they get like the last 30 seconds of scrap time, and LEG gets to like 120 or something, or like 110, like 115 or something, 115, 120, and then it's just like, well, great, right? Like that's the thing, right? And like that stupid stuff like that would happen. Now again, it could also just be a blowout, right? I don't know if LEG even likes to play Bocage. It could be Bocage. Faces blood people have Bocage, but it's just like God. It's like there's probably value on the -2.5, but like we're just like the third -2.5. Like the lines are like actually -2.5. Like this is insane. This year is insane. Like some of these teams are just done, and like there's good teams, and then there's like some good teams, and there's just some bad teams, and it's just like when a good team plays a bad team, the line is just -2.5, and like most of the time they actually do cover that line. I feel like, but we'll see. I don't even. Just God, just a horrible game,
Yeah, a
and
bad
that's
way to finish off Saturday for sure, and, the more I look at it, the more I'm thinking FaZe is the right side, but even still, like, these prices are so high. Just, like, hard point wise, FaZe, Berlin is almost always an auto veto. LAG is the number 1 team on Berlin Hardpoint. As bad of a team as they are, they're still quite good at that, but if that's FaZe's auto veto, okay, you don't get that, and now you've gotta beat them on some maps where they're the best team in the game, and it's like, yeah, like FaZe, number 1 on Bocage, number 2 on Gavudu, number 2 on Tuscan, like, you gotta play 2 of those, good luck. Um, yeah, Control is kind of still a nightmare for the Gorillas. Their best map is Gavudu, where they're 6 and 10 on, congratulations. That is usually the map that FaZe veto. I'd say that's probably the most advantageous Control map for underdogs, Gavudu. Um, yeah, I don't know. All signs point to FaZe win it. I think it's just a matter of do they win it in a sweep? Do they win it in 4? I don't know, but it feels like it's kinda destined to be that way.
yeah.
Unless, right, we do see sometimes in these matches where there's a clear favorite, clear underdog. FaZe might use this game as like, okay, maybe we could try a Berlin Harper. Like, what better practice than to play LAG? Like, let's play them on their best map, and maybe that doesn't go so well for FaZe. So that's how it can get weird, right? We saw FaZe take Paris to a game 5 in stage 1. Like, this kind of stuff happens. So it's really just a matter of like, how does FaZe want to play the map vetoes? And I'm just not comfortable trying to figure that out. So pass.
Yeah, I mean, God, map 1 Berlin. I don't know. This is it's just
Map
horrible.
1 Berlin, just hammer LAG and then forget about it.
Sunday, Boston versus LAG. Now this is actually a this is like an actually decent match of two teams that are like we'll say evenly matched. We won't say they're good teams, we'll just evenly matched teams. Boston LAG. Boston -1.5 +150. LAG +1.5 -200. Boston -125 on the money line. LAG -105. Over 3.5 -310. Under 3.5 +225. I actually like LAG here. I actually think they're slightly better than Boston. I've got them as 54% chance of winning. But the problem is, this is the thing, right? Like, I'm not gonna what are you like? You're gonna bet you're gonna lay -200 on +1.5. That's nuts, right? Like, I think like LAG is a slightly better team. What are the spreads in this match? Let's see here. Okay, so you get 12.5 points map 1 on Hardpoint. That's not particularly fun. -1.5 on the search, +125. These aren't particularly inspiring either. I don't even know. This match is again just kind of blah. But like I
Yeah.
like LEG money line, but like outside of that, like the +1.5 is juiced. I feel like Boston will be able to make a game of it and force a game 5. Well, maybe not. They could lose the hard point. So LEG -1.5 +225. That's possible, I guess. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? Do you think this goes to 5? Do you think this line is correct? I think. Well, I'd flip it. I'd say LEG -125, Boston -105. But again, remember this map. After Seattle plays Boston, this line could flip. Right? We could see this line changing a lot. Right? So I'd I'd lock in on this line as soon as possible and see. What are your thoughts
Yeah,
on it? Do you
yeah,
agree?
yeah, I do. This is one I think I'm largely avoiding even after we see some games early in the week just because I think these lines, they might overshift and then you get value on a team that, did not look good in the previous days, but yeah, right now, so you have it at a 54-46 to LAG. I have it at a 55-45 to Boston. You average that, it's a 50-50 match, and these prices are pretty spot on. If you lean LAG, I can see the minus 105 maybe on the money line making some sense. But right, like how confident in that are you? Maybe a little, but there's better plays to be had on the board. So this match is pretty consequential in terms of major four seeding and champs placement, I would say. So there's intrigue at least, but like the feel I have for this game is very little on either side. So curious to see if the line moves, but yeah, this is a maybe the biggest avoid game of the weekend for me. Like I got nothing. Yeah, I would lean Boston, but ugh, like no thanks. I will just forget about this game and look up the result afterwards and be on with my day.
Yep, that sounds about right. So the second last game of the week, Thieves versus Paris again. Wow, just we're gonna. Will Paris win
Yuck.
a pair? Will
Sunday is bad.
This week is just bad. Will Paris win a map this week? Thieves minus 2.5 plus 140. Paris plus 2.5 minus 185. They're favored to win a map. They're favored to win two maps, I'd say, but like not by a lot. Thieves minus 800 on the money line, plus 475 for Paris. Over 4.5 plus 300. Under 4.5 minus 450. God, even the over underlines are like chalked. I don't even like. God, what is the spread in this game? I think the spread is Thieves minus 35. That seems a little low. But like we're not even getting like 50-point hard points anymore. We're getting like messy, like, oh, 30 some odd points, which is fine. You can still win those, but I don't know. God, Thieves probably wins this. Do they win it? Do they win it 3-0? Ryan, what do you think?
Ooh, good question. I think it's slightly more likely that Thieves win in 4 than it is in 3. So exact percentages, Thieves sweep 32.6%, Thieves in 4 33%. So I mean, again, it just feels like that what match was it from earlier? Was it Optic Paris? Where it was like they're gonna win in 3 or 4, or no, Phase LAG. Like those just feel like, okay, we know the winner. Is it a sweep? Is it a win in 4? I don't know. This again is an avoid match for me, just because it's like if I think like Paris get body bagged by Texas, like then the Thieves price goes up, right? Do Thieves play
Yeah,
somebody before this? Who do they
no.
play?
Well, the thing is, again, if the books are right, this is the first match of the weekend. If they're wrong, then it's on Sunday. So,
Oh, right. So yeah, this is Thieves' only match of the weekend. Paris is gonna get murdered by Optic unless, right, again, Optic decide to be funky with vetoes and slip up a map or two. Um, so yeah, I think this Thieves price only goes up, but like it's already so high. So it's an avoid for me. Your hard point spread, I think, is intriguing, right? Because Thieves hate Bocage. They've played it 7 times all year. They're 3-4 on it. Nothing special. I've already talked about, like, if you're gonna play Paris, play them on a map other than Bocage. Um, so yeah, it feels like you're not gonna get a Bocage. That map is almost always really tight. So if you're looking to lay, 35 points with the Thieves, that's not a bad play because you're probably going to get a Berlin or a Gavudu. And at worst, you get a Tuscan, where again, Thieves are pretty significant favorites over Paris anyway. So I don't mind that. Any other way to play it, I don't know, man. Like I guess we just saw Thieves Search and Destroy, and it was horrendous, as it has been for most of the year. But it's crazy to me, right, that Thieves Search can be that bad, and I still have them as a 60-40 favorite in Search and Destroy versus this Paris team. Like, Paris is a whole nother level of bad, and, like, we honestly shouldn't spend a second talking about Paris every week, but we have to because they're a team that exists. But, yeah, maybe like, I don't know, if you wanna get funky and take Paris, like, map 2 money line or against the spread in map 2, that might be a fun way to play it. Or, yeah, I think I like that Thieves Hardpoint spread the best out of anything, but, yeah, this match, again, is not one I'm that excited for. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
God, yeah. It's just bad. Some of these matches just, man. Now here's interesting. So this is an interesting price point here too. So Optic versus Subliners. So remember we just talked about Surge versus Subliners. Subliners are plus 200. Subliners are even money to beat Optic basically. So this is what this is saying is it's saying Surge is a better team than Optic, which is maybe not crazy,
It's a
but
little crazy. I
a
mean,
little. But like is it that crazy though? Like I will say that my line actually does. I have Subliners as bigger favorites over Optic. Like I have Subliners like a 71% favorite. Now again, it's going to a 5 game 72% favorite. Sorry, it's going to game 5. I actually do like Subliners in this. I have them as minus 240 in this match. I think that um like I it's weird. I like again, Optic had two really bad games. Like they lost to Boston in that reverse sweep, and then they also lost to
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Like my model hasn't been that high because remember I had Minnesota Optic as basically a tie, and now I have this result here too, right? So I actually do like Subliners in this. I think they could definitely win this game, but like again, I feel like if you're saying that like Subliners are on par with Optic, then that means that Subliners are on par with, or that means Subliners should be, I'd say at least better than the Surge. And then it begs questions about Optic going forward because now Optic next week they play Toronto. Are Optic favorites against Toronto? Like it depends obviously what Toronto does this week, right? Because actually no, Toronto's not playing FaZe, right? So say FaZe beats Toronto, say they beat them either 3-1 or 3-0. If Optic loses to Subliners, who's the it was that is that even money? No, that can't be
Yeah,
even money.
like, it would be close to this match, I think, but, yeah,
Would Toronto be
I just
favored?
think
Toronto might be favored.
it could be like, if Toronto beats FaZe and Optic loses to Subliners, like, yeah, that's very much in the cards. I don't know, man, like, Optic New York here. I love Optic, like, it's hard because they did go 0-2 last week, I get it, and Subliners went 2-0. But, like, to me, a good team went 0-2, and a, average team, like, went 2-0, and these prices changed drastically, and I'm not buying it. If this Optic team was sick, like, I do think that's reason for concern, or, like, it would have been for last week's results. Like, I think playing with an illness does affect you a lot, especially, when you need to focus as hard as you do for this video game, like, that matters, and if multiple members of Optic were under the weather, like, it all adds up. So, yeah, I do think I like Optic quite a bit, but yeah, this is obviously a match they could slip up and lose, and if that's the case, then losers bracket is very, very possible for this Optic team. Um, Meanwhile, if you're New York, like, New York's week is gonna be really interesting because they do have a legit chance to go 2-0, and if that's the case, they're 4-0 in the stage, they're in winners bracket, they've essentially made up all the ground they've had to, like, really be in the conversation for champs. You still need a good Major 4, like, run in Major 4 if you're the Subliners, but their wins this week aren't really gonna help them a ton, right? If you beat Seattle, if you beat Optic, well, those teams are already in pretty comfortable situations. So, like, you did a good job winning those games. You need to win games, but you're just not gaining ground on the teams you need to get ground on. Granted, some of those teams are going to play each other, right? Like, um, I'm trying to see here. Uh, Boston and LAG are gonna play each other. Someone's got to lose that match. Um, Honestly, there's not a ton. Like Florida London, I guess would be the next closest match. Minnesota London. So yeah, I mean, I think even with a good week, New York are still going to find themselves in 11th in the standings. Maybe they move up a spot, but or I don't even know. No, they couldn't even move up one spot. So I'm rooting for New York just in terms of let's make this the most chaotic final week of the major four qualifiers as we can. And to do that, like New York would have to keep winning and really muddy this or muddle this champs standings. But I don't know. I do just think this is such a good buyback opportunity on Optic. And I worry that like if Optic come out and smoke Paris, that their line might inflate a little bit. New York plays Seattle. It is possible that New York pull off that huge upset. Well, I guess not huge upset, but like very possible that New York beats Seattle. I mean, if both of those things happen, the price on this match probably doesn't move a ton. But I just think there's such a realistic possibility that Optic come out and smoke Paris, Seattle come out and still look amazing and beat New York. And now this Optic lines up to minus 150, minus 160, and you've lost out on a decent bit of value. So this is one of those rare games on Sunday where I'm saying take it now with Optic just because I really do see this price going up. Um, yeah, although I do like Subliners in their match versus Seattle a little bit, um, I do still think Seattle will win that match at the end of the day. And really winning is what drives these prices more so than like covering spreads or whatever. So Optic for me this week, probably the biggest week for me, just hopping on the Optic bandwagon.
Yeah, it's I don't know what to make of this one. I do like subliners, but like if Optic can figure it out, like if Illy's back, like we still don't know about Illy if they were fighting some sort of flu or something. And again, to be honest, like does Optic really like did Optic really care that much? Like they're in like second place in the standings. They were playing Minnesota. Like people are like, "Oh, they did so bad against Minnesota." Well, Minnesota's actually a half decent team. If they were just out of it or sick or whatever, like what would be the point in Hector calling up like all the substitute players and like just whatever, let them play. They're not feeling well. Like get this match over with. So no, I tend to agree with that. I will say that yeah, it's interesting. I probably won't bet on that one yet because again, if Subliners were to beat Surge, then suddenly they're favorites in this game, and suddenly you're getting Optic at plus money, and then maybe that would be attractive to buy back in at Optic at plus money. I think that might be actually pretty attractive. So
That's true. I mean, the book is indicating that Seattle are very likely to win that New York match, though. So I know I get it. It's tough to play, right? Because I like New York in that match to maybe cover, if not win as an underdog. At the same time, right, I think Seattle will win that match and drive the Optic price up, assuming that Optic can take care of Paris. So it's a fine line of like when do you want to get in on Optic? I don't think like even if you miss the closing line, I think Optic's still going to be a value, which is kind of crazy to say cuz usually there's just so much action on them that they do get a little overpriced, but again, I just think their 0-2 week um has left, a not great feeling in a lot of people's minds and yeah, I don't know. I'm all about the buyback on them. We'll see, if they very well could win both of these matches this week, lose next week, and end up in losers bracket, and it's like, well, okay, that's too bad. But but yeah, in the short term, I do like an Optic bounce back a little bit. But yeah, should be an entertaining week. I'm a little bummed that like the early Sunday games are pretty horrible, but we have at least a few this weekend that should be intriguing. But like any weekend where Paris plays twice, eh, you kind of know that that weekend's not going to be the best. So
yeah, and there are no bounty matches this week. There was two
yeah,
bounty matches last week. There's four next week. So we're ended off with a banger of some bounty matches next week. So Paris versus Minnesota, barn burner. That's a bounty match.
Good for Minnesota.
There are some
Free
other one
money,
there are some
Minnesota.
good ones though. Yeah, I mean that's there's easier ways to give attached $10,000. Um, I mean, okay, there's some good ones though. So Seattle Phase, that's a great bounty match. But then there's also
Oh, yeah.
LAG London, so that's not a great bounty match. But then there's Optic versus Ultra, so that's again, it's just like highs and lows. But no, but again, that's next week. We'll have to see what happens this week. Some of these are going to be a snoozer. I'm going to struggle to get through some of these matches. Um, God, some of them is just this game and this year need to go like to end like and this was like so many of the control maps. It's just like God, like control is so bad. Like it's just like, oh
Yeah.
cool, like oh this team is on defense. It's like oh like winning a map like a round on Tuscan is like, do you get a tick on B? Like, do you get a tick on B? If you get a tick on B, great. You win the match now because you got a tick on B. Like that's literally what Bacage has become. Similar-ish for Berlin. It seems like it's easier to get a tick or two on Berlin. On Gavutu, just God help you. Like honestly.
Yeah.
And like this is what
But is it worse than domination? I mean, obviously, like, an uplink or capture the flag, I think, would be the best scenario if we get good maps for those, but, like, uplink is not happening with a boots on the ground type of game.
you could do it
Um,
if you just gave them like a ramp or something. Like there's ways they could do
yeah.
it. I'd love it if
There
they
was that gridiron mode from World War II, which was uplink, but, like, it was just football, basically, and you just played football, but they didn't even use that, so yeah, game 3 is always a question mark. I honestly wouldn't mind if they just played another search, like, to me, that's just the most interesting, easy game to watch anyway,
in
um,
for this game,
but
yeah. Because
but I
like
think
hard
just
points are
with how
bad.
vetoes work out, like, it makes sense to have a separate game 3 mode, but I think we're still working on what that could be because I there are some control games that are like really intriguing. That phase thieves control, at the end of last week, that was pretty freaking entertaining. Like, and domination had its moments in Modern Warfare, but I don't know. Game 3 is just always a tough one to get through, but it is pretty controversial or like pretty consequential, I should say. Like winning that map 3 is huge. There's a reason it's called the swing mode because, if you're even on your hardpoint maps and your search maps, then it all comes down to that control or whatever it is in
Yeah.
game 3.
Well,
But yeah,
the
I would better maps would do a world of help for sure.
the one thing I would say though is that like if you go back and I find myself instead of rewatching Vanguard games, go back and rewatch like past champs or past years. If you go back to Black Ops 4, like when if you do Black Ops 4 champs, that was also when they had control. And a lot of the times it's like, oh, okay, so like they're like it's not like in this game now, we always know what the second like barring something unforeseen and a huge upset, we know what the second point to be captured is, right? It's like, oh, okay, here they go. They're running around the point, and they're gonna go like they're capturing A, and then they're gonna go to B, and like we always know what the last point's gonna be. You did not know that in Black Ops 4. Sometimes it could go either way as to what the final capture point was, whether or not it was gonna be A or B in Black Ops 4, and like
Yeah, and even
offense and
last
defense
year
was
with
able to win. Like it was
yeah,
not.
that goes to map design a lot, right? These maps are just not great for that. There's a very strong A point or B point on these controls. But even last year, like, yeah, and you're right, in Black Ops 4, if you can work both control zones, like it just adds more strategy to it where like, oh, maybe we get a tick on, and it still does happen in Vanguard, but like, hey, maybe we get a tick on B and force some pressure over here and then commit to A or, maybe we try to simulcap both points. That can be tough, but like if it works, it works. But yeah, just Gavudu, like good luck trying to do that on a map like Gavudu. I mean, Tuscan's very similar. Yeah, if we get better maps, control is better. I mean, that goes with any game mode. Better maps leads to more entertaining matches. But yeah, game 3 I don't know. We'll see. I wish they would just have uplink always and just jetpacks always because those CODs are just crazy fun to watch and to play. It can be a bit of a learning curve, but like, man, I don't know if we're gonna see those anytime soon, but I would love to like get a Black Ops 3 remaster, something crazy, and just watch these pros fly around. But we'll see. That might be years down the road still.
It could be. I mean, we'll have to see what, because again, we're gonna have 2 years now for Modern Warfare 2. Hopefully, it's a good game. Heard mixed things, but they have enough time. Like they're early enough in the development cycle. Like I know Method said that like, oh, it's he basically said they don't make the games for us, and he said there's some stuff that's good, some stuff that's bad. Again, they're gonna get we're getting. I'm assuming we definitely have High Rise back. I'm guessing Terminal will probably back at some point too, if not out out on day one. So I think there are some, like I think it could be better. There's things they probably have to fix. Obviously, they'll have like trophy systems and whatever. But if the maps aren't bad, it'd be nice 2 years. But then the question is what's Black Ops gonna do? Like, are Black Ops gonna do a sequel to Cold War? I don't think so. I don't think they particularly want to. They could let them do a jetpack COD for 2 years. Because the thing is, at that point, then it's like, because at basically at one point in COD's history, they're like, cool, everything's a jetpack COD now, and then people are like, oh, it's too many jetpacks. But if you're just like, cool, this is a jetpack COD, and you're gonna have jetpacks for 2 years, I kind of think they'd be okay with that, especially if you have 2 years of Modern Warfare and you know you're gonna have 2 years of it, and then you go back to Modern Warfare. I don't think people are gonna hate that. And there's gonna be a lot of things, and we're gonna have to talk about this in the future, like a lot of interesting things for next year. Like for example, next year, are they gonna have like at the basically 1 year mark, right? Because there's gonna be a season, and then there's gonna be champs, obviously. And champs will probably be able at the same time because I suspect they're not going to want to particularly compete with the NFL. They might, because of the earlier, slightly earlier release of this year, and because of insane pressure that was put on them, I could see them having a tournament in like December. I think they're probably going to have a tournament probably maybe a week or two before Christmas, because at that point, then you're not. The thing of it is, you're not actually competing with college football. You're just competing with the NFL on Sunday, and that's for them. They'd be like, cool, win, right? You're like, cool, that's doable for us, so we'll call that a win, and walk away from it. So you're probably looking at a couple weeks before Christmas on a weekend, and then they probably will go in like January. They'll start like they'll do another major or something in like January. They'll start like in January or something, or maybe February, depending. I'm not sure exactly how to do it, but they'll figure something out, and they'll start in January. But then the thing is, then okay, great. So then we have a full season until like August, and then what? So then are we
Yeah,
going to
then
shut
what?
down? Like,
That's a big question mark. I think maybe a quicker off season and then just turn it around and say this is the new season.
but my
That
question is,
that's on the table, but
what will change? Like, what's going to change fundamentally from champs to the start of the next season? Is it going to be the same maps? Probably. I mean, obviously, Hardpoint and Search are going to stick around. I mean, that would be if control comes out of the box. If control is there out of the box, I keep saying out of the box, but like people buy the game digitally now, so there's no box any. I'm not going to be buying it digitally. There's no box anymore. But like, will it? Will the game mode? Will the maps change? I could see them because if it's going to be a full 2 year COD, I could see them be like, cool. Here's 5 new maps in like November of 2023. At that point, I could see them saying that. Or are they going to say like? No, it's like the same. Now I could see them continually adding maps, and they could try to cycle a couple maps in and out. I could see them doing that, which apparently we could not do in Vanguard because apparently all the maps sucked until they decided to bring the worst map from Call of Duty World War II in. I could see them doing something like that, but that's an interesting question I have because it'll matter a lot, right? Because we're talking about different players in different games, and one of the things I think we've talked about is the fact that like it's insane to have these teams build a team around a game when you have no idea what that game is, right? Like for example, we're talking about the end of this year, right? And a lot of these teams are going to get blown up. I think pretty much every team, maybe with the exception of Phase, but even then, I'd say there's going to be a change somewhere in Phase. We're looking at basically every team getting change, having a change. How can you build a team How can you build a team to compete in the next year when you don't even know what the game is? Now, again, you're obviously going to have a better sense of that in in Modern Warfare 2, but like we have like what's the better way to build a team for next year? Is it a better way to build a team around Modern Warfare, or is it a better team to build a team around Vanguard, right? Like these guys did well in Modern Warfare, so like are we going to get like Mac, and like is Mac going to be a sought after player? or like I don't think anybody's gonna base it off Cold War, but people are gonna base it off of Vanguard performances, and like that's an interesting thing, right? Like that's a very interesting angle, and we'll have to see that as we go to the end. But again, I think that's enough for today. I'd say. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. And actually, sorry, Ryan, did you have anything you wanted to say on that about how next season will go, or
Just that we'll need to do an off-season pod,
for sure?
going into, like, this fall, just talking about what this Modern Warfare 2 game might be like, and, yeah, I'd love to go more in depth on, the two-year format of it, like, I'm sure they'll have 2 separate champs, but is it one gigantic season with 2 champs? Is it 2 separate seasons? Will there be expansion? There's a lot we could go into, with, like, an off-season pod, roster moves, all that typical stuff, but
And
we'll have to save that for, a month or I guess 2 months maybe down the road from
yeah,
now.
and also it'll be like, okay, what horrible decision did the COD League make for format, and then how do they fix
Yeah.
that horrible decision a week late? Like they'd be like, okay, community update, and then we fix the thing. So yeah, that a lot of fun things going to happen this off season. But anyways, we'll leave that for there for now for our fourth last episode of the season. But yeah, we're gonna have to do some off season pods for sure. All right, thank everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Thank you.